Fish are an area where I'm open to discussion, truly. I'm open to discussing different types of fish. I'm open to discussing all of this. But for me, that is a gray zone that I have landed on yes.
Today, I'm responding to Charlie Hoopert's reasons for being pescatarian instead of vegan. If you don't know who Charlie Hoopert is, he's the co-founder of Charisma on Command and currently hosts one of my favorite podcasts, the Dropping In podcast. Charlie is the second biggest influence on myself going vegan, which is ironic because he's not even vegan. So today we're going through his reasons for still consuming fish to see if they logically hold up. I'm also going to be responding to his brother Henry's points because he had a few questions for vegans.
My life involves killing, period. That's where we are technologically. It's like, even if all I do is kill beans, I am going to cease life.
Charlie is right that his life involves killing, as all of our lives do. The only way to get around that would be to go live in a cave somewhere and only eat fruit. So yes, all of our lives involve killing. There's no getting around that fact. But this doesn't justify unnecessary killing. Let's say I went and I shot my neighbor's dog and they said, "What the hell? Why did you shoot my dog?" And I said, "My life involves killing." Obviously, that would not be a satisfactory response. Yes, we all take life, but the distinction that's relevant here is whether or not it's necessary and whether that life is sentient. Since we don't need to eat fish to survive, the consumption of them is unnecessary. A lot of people think vegans just don't want to kill anything that's alive. That's why we get so many people yelling at us that plants feel pain.
You're killing a plant to eat it.
But in reality, veganism is about sentience and protecting animals' rights.
There are negative consequences for other lives through
For your existence.
my existence, period. End of story. And it's like not one-to-one because I can't eat one bean. I got to eat all the beans. If I'm like, I can't do it.
Go ahead and kill as many beans as you want because beans are not sentient. Even if we did find out that plants are sentient, you would still save plants by consuming them directly. When you eat fish, you have to account for all the plants that the fish were fed throughout their lives before they got to market weight.
That's an interesting point already. That you just acknowledged that I don't hear in anyone else. It's like if you have a phone, like we're going to talk about eating meat, and we're like the Cobalt guy on Joe Rogan talking about human slavery that was involved to get your phone here, and it's like people dying because of the fumes.
It's hilarious to me that Henry thinks this is original because I literally can't even go on the street and talk to people about veganism without someone being like, "Oh, but you have a cell phone." So the reason this argument isn't very good is because it's kind of like a mix of ad hominem and the nirvana fallacy. Essentially, it's not an argument against veganism and animal rights. It's an argument against vegans trying to paint us as hypocrites. Let's say I were beating a dog and you asked me to stop and I said, "Well, you have a cell phone." That would be a ridiculous thing to say in that context, and it's a ridiculous thing to say when you're talking about animal rights. Just because vegans can't be perfect doesn't give you the right to abuse animals for convenience and taste pleasure. Let's say there were two cell phones and one was made without harming humans and the other one was made by killing a bunch of babies. Obviously, I'd choose the one that killed a bunch of babies. I'd choose the one that didn't harm any humans. But that's not the choice that we have. Whereas when you're choosing to buy plant-based products or dead animals, that's exactly the choice you have. You know exactly which one causes unnecessary suffering. And while we're talking about kind of the human harm in the cell phone industry, I also want to bring up that there are actual human slaves in the fishing industry.
When we didn't catch enough fish or squid, we were beaten by the captain. We were beaten a lot.
We could also go into all the human rights violations in the meat industry, but I feel like that would take a whole other video.
There's this dog that lives with me. I love him very much. He seems very similar to the expression that I would see in a cow or a pig or, especially those two that are very common in America. And I go, yeah, I don't want my dog, which I can feel that with, and cows, which I've connected with, to be in those positions where it seems like they're suffering so deeply. Then I go to chickens and I go, okay, what am I receiving here? They seem kind of dumb. Turkeys seem really out of it, but still there appears to me, and this is where it becomes my own subjective projection of the capacity to suffer. I am not referring to, we can talk about the brain chemistry and how their brain might be similar to mine, but I actually think that where I really ground my moral sense is in an intuitive sense and not in a biological having sliced something open. Though I am open to that updating.
I definitely understand why Charlie has a hard time empathizing with fish. I mean, they look completely different from us. They have faces that don't express emotions that we can relate to. They live in basically the ocean. It's like they live on a different planet. So I definitely see where he's coming from. On the surface, it seems like we have nothing in common with fish. So of course it's difficult to empathize with them. But all of that stuff, the way they look and how they're far away, all that stuff is arbitrary. It doesn't factor into whether or not we should consider them in our circle of moral concern. That's why this idea of an intuitive sense of morality, while it sounds like it makes sense, is actually very dangerous. This is the way that most people operate, and we can see how the world is worse off for it. People in countries where they're fighting wars and they can't empathize with their enemy, men who can't empathize with women, and this is exactly the line of thinking that allows most people to pay for farm animals to be tortured on a daily basis. It's because their intuitive sense of morality doesn't allow them to empathize with those creatures. There's evidence that when people are eating animals, they devalue the animals in their minds. Maybe this is happening when Charlie eats fish. Maybe he can't empathize with them because he's eating them. Every time he sits down to a meal, his brain tries to justify his decision to consume fish and cuts off that ability to see them as sentient individuals. Charlie says the scientific studies aren't that persuasive to him, so I won't go over too many of those here, but I will link them into the description. For now, I'll just mention that an Australian marine biologist who has studied fish for over 25 years has said that we should look at fish in the same way that we look at pigs or cows. The other thing I want to touch on is bycatch. Even if Charlie doesn't find these arguments about fish sentience persuasive, I'm betting that he can intuitively connect with sea turtles, dolphins, and sharks. Commercial fishing boats kill massive amounts of all of these animals while they're trying to catch the fish that people consume. Even if Charlie doesn't think that tuna should fall into a circle of moral concern, you can't eat tuna without also killing dolphins. Alright guys, so Charlie just messaged me and he said that if this video gets 500 likes, he's going to go vegan. Alright, so that didn't actually happen, but the more people who like this video, the more likely he is to see it, so hit it right now.
Fish for me are that like dividing line where my own convenience does enter into it, because like, okay, to survive off mollusks for me is like that upsets my stomach, and there's, that's tougher to do practically. Fish are still well within a practical range of I can get my taste buds made happy. I can get protein from them in a dense protein source.
I have a feeling that this is Charlie's biggest concern, and I felt the same way before I went vegan. I was really worried that it'd be impossible to find food, and when I found it, it wouldn't taste that good, but that hasn't been my experience at all. I love eating a plant-based diet. I look forward to my meals more now, and it's incredibly easy to find options wherever I go. I also want to mention that Charlie lives in Malibu, and California is one of the easiest states to be vegan, so I'm betting that it would be a lot more convenient than he thinks.
I did lose 15 pounds, basically, not simply as this, but like when I stopped eating beef and chicken, it became tougher to maintain weight, and I'm still okay and I'm healthy, but there are consequences to that, and though I could make it up in protein shakes and fish, practically that has not happened for me.
As for losing 15 pounds, he said in other places that that had more to do with psychedelics, meditation, and letting go of the need to be physically fit for other people. And if he wanted to gain that weight, he could choose tofu, tempeh, other high-protein vegan foods. There are plenty of vegan bodybuilders. If they can make it work, I think that Charlie could as well. He also has the resources to hire a vegan chef or get some sort of meal delivery service to make the transition even easier.
It's not like if anybody's like, oh, animal products, it's like, really? You wouldn't eat a cricket, or you wouldn't eat a mollusk, or you wouldn't eat a this? Because at some point you're getting so close to what would appear to be the consciousness level of a Venus flytrap, which by the way is, outsmarting flies every damn day. I guess what I'm saying is, I see this stuff as existing on a continuum. I think that it is unfair when people try to like draw these hard lines and say that their line is real.
There definitely is a continuum of sentience, and it's hard for us to know where certain animals fall, especially when we get down to the level of insects. Personally, I wouldn't eat most mollusks. The bivalves are the ones that I'd be most likely to eat because they don't have the brain capacity to feel pain. At least that's what scientists think right now. but scientists used to think that about fish and they have since been proven wrong, so I'm gonna just be on the safe side. One of the ways I like to measure sentience is lifespan. A lot of people don't realize how long fish actually live. I made a little chart and you'll notice that tuna can live up to 26 years, which is the same lifespan as a cow. So Charlie, what if you're wrong? What if fish are just as sentient as the other animals that you don't eat? What consequences does your current lifestyle have on these individuals? If you eat 365 fish per year for the next 50 years, that's over 18,000 individuals that you have put through massive amounts of suffering when you don't need to. In terms of increasing suffering, being pescatarian could be worse than eating meat. To be fair, I think both are bad. But the reason I say that being pescatarian might be worse is because fish are smaller. When you sit down to lunch, you're taking the life of an entire fish, whereas if you eat a burger, that's only 1/1000th of a cow. You're also missing the opportunity to be an amazing advocate for the animals. And we just lost Cosmic Skeptic, so we need someone with your platform, your communication skills. You could be one of the best advocates of our generation, but you can't be a good advocate if you've got dead fish on your plate.
I'd like to draw two lines.
Yeah.
How about hunting your own food? And how
Yes.
about invasive species of deer on Hawaii?
So I've talked about this a million times, so I don't
Just
want to go too deep into it.
Meat eaters always bring up the most fringe arguments instead of talking about what I actually think would be most interesting, which is why Henry thinks that it's morally justifiable for him to pay for animals to be tortured on factory farms. But I'll go ahead and answer his questions anyway. If you are hunting for your own food out of necessity, I think you can morally justify it in the same way that you can morally justify killing a human if it's done out of necessity. If it's not done out of necessity, which is the vast majority of hunters, then it's still immoral because you're violating the rights of that animal. As far as invasive species, hunting only makes the problem worse. Bite-Sized Vegan made an excellent video about this. I'll link to it in the description.
Apparently, there are two kinds of vegans. There's a rights vegan, which is like it has a right to life in the same way that like it doesn't matter if a human suffers when you kill a human. It has a right to its own existence. And then there are welfare vegans, which is concerned primarily with suffering. I find myself concerned primarily with like suffering, and I guess fall into the category of a welfare, but you can make the rights argument as well. So that's why hunting is wildly mitigated, and a regenerative farming that treats the animals with kindness and gives them a good life would be much preferable to a factory farm. And all of those things factor into my own personal decision.
I would love for Charlie to transition into a more rights-based approach because this suffering idea leaves the door open for this happy farm nonsense. Just because you give an animal a happy life does not mean you're justified to take that life from them. I wonder if Charlie would say that it was moral for Jeffrey Dahmer to kill people, assuming they didn't suffer during that process, as long as they didn't have friends and family who would suffer as a result from their death as well. I would hope that he would say no. And if he said no, I would want to know, what's the morally relevant difference between humans and animals that makes it okay to kill animals if you give them a good life, but not humans? I'll wait. In the meantime, if you want to see my review of all the ocean documentaries, there were quite a few that I watched while researching this video, join my Patreon today. As always, special thanks to my morally superior patrons, Amy, Andy, and Deepak.